Hello, everyone. I am Victoria Jones. I'm the University Archivist here at Florida Gulf Coast University, and I'll be doing a quick lesson on the difference between historical primary sources and secondary sources. So, to begin, what are historical primary sources? The easiest way to think about primary sources as a historian is to think of them as things that are created at the time of the event for which you are researching, versus secondary sources are typically created after the fact and they involve some sort of interpretation or analysis. So, in that case, you'll be thinking of like historical nonfiction books about a topic, or you might be thinking about like a documentary or a journal article. And so these are usually things that are using primary sources to make a point. Either they could be argumentative, they could be informational, but they're using primary sources in order to tell a story somehow, some way. Don't worry, I have examples. So the first thing I have are letters that were written during World War II. And so here's a quick example of them. It is a World War II letter. You can kind of see the writing some. And so this is from someone who served in World War II. You can see the first line is Dear Mother and Dad. And so he is writing home. And he's talking about his experiences as he's serving for the US during World War II. That is considered a primary source, right? If you are doing a research topic or research question about World War II, this could be a primary source for you, versus this book, which doesn't have a great cover, but is called Louisiana During World War II. And this is a case of a historian has written a full-length historical text on the state of Louisiana during World War II. And the historian, Jerry Sanson, if you're interested, is using primary sources in addition to other secondary sources in order to write this work. And it involves historical interpretation of those primary sources and analysis. So this would be a secondary source. Another example of a type of primary source would be a photograph. So here I have photos from President Carter's presidential campaign. This one is got Carter and the Charles Ray, who is the man who took the photo, as well as another one from, well, I assume Carter he's not president yet, of course, is getting out of his car. These are primary sources. These are taken during his presidential campaign, and they're about the presidential campaign. However, I have another book, which would be an example of a secondary source, Dropping the Torch, which is about Carter's presidency. So both the primary source and the book are about President Carter, slightly different time periods. This is before his presidency. This is written after his presidency, talking about his presidency. But still, this is a historical text that is using primary sources for historical analysis and interpretation to write about Carter's presidency after the fact. And it was definitely after the fact because this was published in 2011. So, primary sources, photograph, letter, historical texts, historical books like these, secondary sources, is a really good way to frame it. I have one final example. I really love political cartoons as primary sources. This is like in a cover, so I'm sorry about the glare, but these are political cartoons related to Watergate. And so these were drawn and published during and in the aftermath of, well, I guess in the aftermath of Watergate. But you could also look at a journal article about Watergate. So here we can see an article that's published about Watergate in the Journal of Modern American History in 2020. And if you scroll down to the footnotes, you can actually see that it uses excerpts from the 1973 Watergate hearings in its writing and analysis. And so in that case, that article would be the secondary source. So remember, if it's written at the time of the event that you're researching, it's probably a primary source. And if it's written after the fact about an event that happened previously, it's probably a secondary source. I say probably because there are some instances of when that's not the case, but we'll save that for another day. I hope this has been a helpful, brief introduction to primary and secondary sources.